Still haven't you responding to 1160 West Forest and Ed O'Connor's restaurant? Someone was reporting someone fighting or being stabbed. They could see blood everywhere.
We heard the lady screaming.
And the screaming had turned to a screech.
Welcome back, and thanks for being here. As you may know, YouTube is not very kind to true crime channels in the algorithm, so if you could give this video a like or leave a comment, it would be greatly appreciated. And if you haven't checked out the channel on Patreon yet, then make sure you do that after this video, because there you'll have access to more than 30 exclusive Patreon-only videos, with more being added each month. The case I'll be telling you about today is one that happened right in the middle of a very crowded restaurant. It happened not far from me, and it was terrifying to hear about. But unlike many people thought at the time, the attack was not completely random. The woman who was killed by someone who she likely thought she would never see again. Amanda Dabrowski was born on February 18, 1988, in Southbridge, Massachusetts, to her parents, Edward and Beth Dabrowski. She was said to be smart, caring, compassionate, and outgoing. Amanda was very close with her family, and after she moved a few towns away from her parents when she got older, she would still make sure to visit them at least once every week. Amanda was also said to be a reliable, confident, and caring person who loved her Great Dane named Gus, watching Jeopardy, and drinking wine. In fact, anytime someone would come to visit her, Amanda would have a glass of wine waiting for them, as she was such a big wine connoisseur. She also ran her own blog called The Glorious Grape, where she discussed wines. Amanda had graduated from Northeastern University with a bachelor's degree in biology and a minor in criminal justice. Following that, she had moved to Florida for a job, but had moved back to Massachusetts permanently in 2018. Upon returning back home to Massachusetts, 31-year-old Amanda got a job at the pharmaceutical giant Bristol-Myers Squibb in Devens, Massachusetts. It was here that she would meet Carlos Asensio, who worked as a quality assurance specialist. Carlos was very smart, and he had actually graduated in 2012 from the University of Connecticut with a degree in cellular and molecular biology. Shortly after meeting, Amanda began to date Carlos. Even though he was normally not her type, she decided to give something new a try. They had then dated for about 2 or 3 months before Amanda broke things off because Carlos was very, very clingy. And, needless to say, he did not take the breakup very well at all. And not long after, on April 16, 2019, Carlos booked a conference room at work and asked Amanda to come to a meeting. During this meeting, he would ask her to get back together with him. But when Amanda told him no, he pulled an envelope of cash out of his pocket and threw it across the table, accusing her of having sex for money. He would, however, think better of these actions, and the following day, Carlos apologized to her. He then continued to try to find reasons to interact with Amanda because, as he said, his biggest failure in life was not being able to maintain a relationship with her, which is extremely odd since they had only dated for a few months. But only 4 days after Carlos had apologized to Amanda on Easter morning, April 21st, Amanda woke up in her East Main Street home in Ayer, where she had just moved about 4 months prior. She heard noises coming from downstairs, so she decided to get out of bed and go investigate. When she got downstairs, she saw an open window and a dark bag lying on the floor with handcuffs in it. As she knelt down to examine this bag, suddenly Amanda heard a noise coming from her left, and when she looked, she saw a masked intruder coming towards her with a stun gun. He then hit her with it, numerous times. But Amanda was able to grab her vape pen and stab the intruder with it, breaking the pen. She then hit the attacker in the head with a wine bottle before the assailant jumped on her back and tried to pull her to the ground. The man then began to strangle Amanda, but she fought back, and as his fingers slipped down, she was able to almost bite one of his fingers off, she said. This was enough for Amanda to be able to break free from his grip and run to the kitchen to grab a paring knife. She believed that she stabbed him, she later told police. However, she wasn't sure because it did not deter him in the least. Her attacker was relentless, so she grabbed a larger knife. But he then pointed a gun at her head and told her to get to her knees. Amanda began to scream at this attacker and asked him what he wanted, but he said nothing. He just gestured at her with his hand in a cutting motion across his neck. It was then that Amanda looked into her attacker's eyes and she saw fear. She decided to take that opportunity and she was able to fight the gun out of the man's hands. As they struggled for the gun, this man also fell halfway out the window, and Amanda took that opportunity to shove him all the way out the window, then close and lock it. Immediately after, Amanda ran for her phone to call 911, but it was at that point that she realized her phone was missing. So instead, she grabbed her knife, her dog, her car keys, and got in her car and drove down to the Air Police Station to report what had just happened. She would additionally tell police that the assailant looked very similar to her ex-boyfriend, Carlos. Amanda would end up being hospitalized, bruised and bloodied, and her right hand had been mangled during the attack. When police went to Amanda's apartment later, they found a 38mm bullet. And they also found a 38mm semi-automatic gun with one round in the chamber, and they found a stun gun nearby as well. Since Amanda's phone had been stolen, police were able to request an emergency ping. At 4:37 a.m., they tracked it traveling east down Route 2. About 20 minutes later, it was traveling north up 495 towards Lowell. By 5 a.m., the phone was tracked in Nashua, New Hampshire, where Carlos lived. It continued to travel through Merrimack, Bedford, and Hooksett, and by 6 a.m., it stopped in Bow, New Hampshire when the battery died. It looked like Carlos was possibly making his way up to Canada. Police would contact Carlos's parents in an attempt to locate him, and they said that they had not seen him. However, he was supposed to be attending Easter dinner that night, but had taken their car, a 2006 Nissan Maxima, the night before and never returned it. When they tried to call him, he wouldn't answer any of their phone calls or text messages. Then, Carlos also did not show up for work the following day, April 22nd. So police decided to contact Canadian Border Patrol and see if they had spotted Carlos crossing the border. And they had. He had crossed just hours after Amanda's attack at 8:56 a.m., driving his father's car. Now, Canadian Border Patrol had actually put Carlos through 2 rounds of questioning, because when he had crossed, he looked rather disheveled and he'd been in possession of a bulletproof vest. Ultimately, however, they ended up letting him through. Carlos had then parked his car at the Montreal airport and, using his U.S. passport, had gotten on a flight to Cancun at 1:30 p.m. 4 days later, police issued a warrant for his arrest. He was charged with breaking and entering in the nighttime to commit a felony, armed home invasion, assault with intent to murder, armed masked robbery, assault and battery with a deadly weapon, and assault and battery on a household member. But police were unable to find him or arrest him. They were, however, able to locate Amanda's cell phone. It was located on the side of 93 in Bow, New Hampshire, in a black duffel bag. Inside this duffel bag, they also found duct tape, handcuffs, knives, and a bunch of ammunition. After weeks of not hearing from Carlos, police believed he was still in Cancun, and Amanda started to believe that he was no longer going to be a problem for her. Either he was in Mexico or he would come back and police would place him under arrest. However, Amanda was still not taking chances, and she moved out of her Air apartment and moved back into her parents' home in Webster, Massachusetts, about an hour away. She then started to emotionally and physically heal from the attack, and started to feel safer knowing that Carlos was down in Cancun. Then in May, however, Amanda received a series of threatening emails saying that neither she nor her family were safe. This prompted her to obtain a restraining order, just in case Carlos came back.
And I'm not meaning to suggest in any way you're not worthy or that it doesn't meet the standard, but what is the point?
I want to make it clear to the court that I feel as long as he is not in custody, that there is an element of danger. I want to do everything in my power to keep myself safe from this monster.
Also, one day in June, when Amanda was walking through the neighborhood with her sister, she suddenly spotted a drone overhead and said to her, "Could you imagine if Carlos was somehow watching me?" She made sure to report these emails as well as the suspicious drone to police. So after months of not hearing from Carlos and assuming that she was safe, on the night of July 3rd, 2019, Amanda decided to venture out of the home for the first time on her own. And she went to O'Connor's Restaurant and Bar on West Boylston Street in Worcester to join a meetup group that was discussing the book Garlic and Sapphires, The Secret Life of a Critique in Disguise by Ruth Reel. After she had been there for about an hour, around 8 p.m., Amanda headed to the bathroom. But what she didn't know was that her 28-year-old boyfriend, Carlos Asensio, had just entered the restaurant. He was seen on video surveillance footage walking around looking for Amanda. And when she exited the bathroom a few moments later, she would come face to face with Carlos. When she did, she let out a scream as he began stabbing her with the 2 knives that he was holding in each hand. Another patron at the restaurant heard Amanda scream and immediately jumped up and grabbed Carlos. Carlos, however, was able to stab this man in the side. Luckily, 3 other men who had been eating at the restaurant at the time also jumped up from their table and were able to tackle Carlos to the ground. One of them was even able to pin his arm and get the knife from him. While being held down, Carlos was shouting, "Kill me, I deserve it." At the same time, there were other people who had been eating in the restaurant who were tending to Amanda's wounds and trying to slow the bleeding. Carlos had stabbed her quite a few times, but she was still alert and conscious, and unbelievably even talking. While one man was trying to use his belt as a tourniquet on Amanda's arm, she said to him, "He's not supposed to be here." When emergency responders arrived, they found Amanda lying on the floor of the restaurant, barely conscious. She had been stabbed 58 times in a matter of 15 to 20 seconds. Unbelievable. She was then rushed to UMass Memorial Medical Center for emergency surgery, but sadly would end up being pronounced dead just hours later at 11:42 p.m.
Alan Corson Jr. was out when he heard a woman's cries for help. He says he saw a man on top of a woman stabbing her over and over again. He grabbed the man and put him in a chokehold. Soon, other restaurant patrons and workers jumped in to help.
I got one of the knives from him, and I look over, and there's a kitchen knife sitting right there, and it's covered in blood. And the guy's just like, "Kill me." I mean, it's surreal.
Corson himself was stabbed during the struggle. Several witnesses held the attacker down until police arrived and arrested Amanda's ex-boyfriend, Carlos.
Now, despite the fact that authorities were actively looking for Carlos, he was able to cross the border and sneak back into the United States undetected. He would later admit to authorities that he had done this illegally. Apparently, after crossing back over the border 2 weeks prior to Amanda's murder, Carlos had run into a homeless couple at a bus stop in Worcester. And they had invited him to stay with them at their abandoned trailer that they were squatting at on Grafton Street. He had accepted and stayed with them for a few weeks. The couple would also speak with police and inform them that Carlos had originally told them he had gotten into a fight with his ex-girlfriend and another man. So he had pulled a gun in order to defend himself, and that's why police were all looking for him. But the couple believed that there was much more to that story and hoped that eventually Carlos would come clean with them. On July 3rd, the same day that Carlos would end up attacking Amanda, he told the couple that he was staying with that he was headed down to the Mustard Seed Meal Kitchen while they napped. When he returned a little while later with a single loaf of bread, he seemed giddy, and he told them that he had been invited to dinner at O'Connor's restaurant by a friend, and he didn't know what to wear. This was the first time the couple saw him show any signs of happiness. They also would tell police that Carlos had a very strangely heavy bag, but they had not examined it. Not until after they heard about Amanda's attack, that is. At that point, they decided to look inside the backpack and see what he'd been hiding. There, they found a handwritten note, binoculars, duct tape, and homemade Molotov cocktails. They also found that Carlos had a U.S. passport, Mexican and Canadian money, a New England transit schedule, and bus tickets in 2 different names. And as to how Carlos knew that Amanda was even going to be at O'Connor's that night, well, when he had crossed the border back into the United States, he had purchased a car off of Craigslist, then driven to her parents' house in Webster and duct taped a cell phone underneath Amanda's car in order to track her. When Carlos Asencio went to trial for Amanda Dabrowski's murder in early June of 2023, prosecutors said that the murder was all about revenge. They told the jury that Carlos had lost his job, become homeless, and he blamed Amanda for these problems. He had also decided that if he couldn't have Amanda, then nobody would. The defense didn't claim that Carlos hadn't killed Amanda. They couldn't. They did, however, claim that he was mentally ill and in the middle of a psychotic episode when he had stabbed her. In court, a forensic psychologist who had previously examined Carlos said that the man had been hearing voices in his head for 2 years. In more recent months, it had progressed into explosive bouts of anger. Carlos's issues stretched back years, and he had even tried to take himself out of this world in 2008. More recently, he had even held a knife to his own neck. Carlos Asencio's 8-day trial ended up resulting in a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. He was also convicted on a charge of assault and battery with a deadly weapon, in regards to the other patron who had been at the restaurant that night, whom he had stabbed in the side. His murder conviction alone, however, carried a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole.
The defense argued that Asencio suffered from mental illness. Jurors didn't accept that, and Dabrowski's father was grateful.
No verdict will ever bring Amanda back. We are relieved that a jury found this man responsible for taking her from us. We know he can never harm another person again. The jury helped us find some justice today, though we know there are no real winners here.
The attack that Carlos had inflicted on Amanda back in April had actually resulted in her being terminated from her job within 48 hours. And following her death, her parents filed a lawsuit against Bristol Myers Squibb because of this. The case was ultimately settled through mediation. Amanda's parents, however, are also fighting to close a legal loophole in Massachusetts that grants employees who are victims of domestic violence 15 days leave. However, this only applies to full-time employees and not part-time or contract employees, which Amanda was at the time. Before O'Connor's restaurant and bar opened back up following Amanda's attack, the staff stood at the entrance and they all said a prayer for her and her family. A memorial service for Amanda Dabrowski was also held on Saturday, July 13th, 2019, in Dudley, Massachusetts. In lieu of flowers, her family asked for donations to be sent instead to a homeless shelter in Worcester or to a local canine rescue. How was it that Carlos was able to get back over the border without anyone noticing and drive a car all the way from there to Massachusetts, I assume, without a cop pulling him over? And how long was he planning her murder for? Ever since the day she broke up with him? It seems like he was thinking about her each and every single day for months, longer than they had even dated for. And it's so sickening knowing just how giddy and excited Carlos was getting, knowing what he was going to do to Amanda later that day in the middle of a crowded restaurant. So if you like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. And turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least twice every single week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care guys. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims never get forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a case you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email at awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.